So good evening. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone to our New York Tech lecture series, Fall Semester 2020. I am Maria Perbellini, Dean of the School of Architecture and Design, and I would like to invite all of you to mute your audio, so we will not have some background noises that can interfere with the lecture. And I want to anticipate also that at the end of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions to our guest. You can actually use the chat feature of Zoom. You can see at the bottom of your screen and start typing questions. And since I will be the moderator and the respondent for the following part after the presentation, I will make sure to address some of your questions. I'm not promising that we will answer to all of your questions, but we will try our best to pick eventually some of those most significant. It is an absolute pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest this evening, Kai-Uwe Bergmann, partner of the globally awarded and extremely successful firm BIG, founded in 2005 by the Danish architect Bjarke Ingels, who was named one of the top 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine in 2016. BIG is a Copenhagen, New York, London, and Barcelona-based group of forward-thinking architects, designers, urbanists, creative researchers, and visionary innovators, investigating the idea of information-driven design as the driving force for design processes through the analysis of local cultures and environments, dynamic and changing patterns of contemporary life, and parameters of the local and global economy. Kai-Uwe Bergmann is recognized in the AIA College of Fellows, the AIA's highest membership honor, is an architect registered in 13 American states and in Canada. He sits on the board of the prestigious Van Allen Institute. At BIG, he leads the business development of the office and brings his expertise to proposals around the world, as well as overseeing BIG's communications. Kai-Uwe most recently contributed to a variety of urban master plans and landscape projects, as for example, the Dry Line, a resiliency plan to protect 10 miles of Manhattan's coastline. He is a prolific lecturer and a participant on many national and international design juries. He also taught at the University of Florida, the New School of Architecture in San Diego, and his alma mater, the University of Virginia. Kai-Uwe, yes. We are very excited to have you here with us this evening. To all participants, please join me in welcoming Kai-Uwe Bergmann.
Thank you so much, Maria. I will ask the, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic.
We see also your slides on the side, so maybe
I'm going to change that.
Perfect.
So thank you, Maria. And thank you, NYIT. I think it is absolutely great to be speaking to you here locally because we are sharing an experience that, as Maria has said, is one of humanity. It is both local here to us in this city, in New York, but of course it is also connecting us globally as never before. In my lifetime, nor I expect yours. And I think it's a moment of reflection. And so before I get into the lecture of Formgiving, I want to just think about this moment in history and this moment that stands before us, both as students and as professionals. You know, mankind and humanity has often been confronted with issues and situations like this before. And I think it's our institutions like universities that have been around long enough that can actually remember and can also show how it has dealt with these kind of shocks in the past. I'm just going to go through a few slides where I kind of show how a certain pandemic or a certain disease or a certain moment in history has actually led to leaps, both urbanistically as well as health. And cholera was something that was very, very dire because people were living in sort of inhumane situations. And that epidemic actually led to the sewer system being upgraded in many, many cities to get rid of the disease. Likewise, overcrowding, like we are familiar with in Lower Manhattan and the Lower East Side at the turn of last century, led to the conception of parks and green areas and finding spaces because the sidewalks were simply not wide enough or gave people the chance to actually have the balance that they needed. And of course, calamities such as World War II and were then also gave birth to entire new systems of transportation and movement, and in this case also sort of a defense system to move people very quickly from one place to another. And 9/11, that probably many of us here on this in this evening have a memory of, also led to a huge new number of security measures that we can see every single day as we walk through New York City. And then even more recently, and a project that we've been, and I personally have been involved in for the past 8 years, is Superstorm Sandy and what it did to New York, the city, the 5 boroughs, and the entire Northeast region. And that we started to think about how to create a more resilient city. And so this moment right now with COVID is a chance for us to see how we again start to think about our city, about our urbanity and our humanity, and find ways in which we can actually, again, think of improving. And that's where I believe public realm is going to really have a very important part to play. Imagine now with me, if you could sort of take the 3 scales of mobility. We see how much bike riding and the open space is so important right now in this moment. We can also see that scooters and e-scooters and e-bikes have sort of taken the place actually of much of our public transportation. But we still will need public transportation, and we still will need traffic and cars. So how can we now start to think about the city, which has been created by sort of arterials, created by a patchwork of streets that predominates the car and our public transportation system, to kind of looking at not just a one-dimensional city, but one in which the grid, which is so democratic and so powerful as an organizational system, could actually start to be woven with pedestrian-oriented streets, e-mobility and scooter streets, and then the traffic and arterials, looking to a potential, what we call Manhattan woven city, a woven grid, a woven patchwork that starts to rethink and allows people to expand their lives into those now sort of streets that are predominantly there for vehicles. We believe that through our own efforts over the past couple of years, we've shown how something like the BQE could turn into the BQP, where both the cars that are there and necessary and also reducing can coexist with people and bicycles and open space. We reimagined actually during COVID the Brooklyn Bridge to become a pedestrian and bicycle prioritized space, and to integrate new technologies such as autonomous vehicles, so that the bridge, and not every bridge, but many of the bridges, could start to again, reinforce that patchwork, that wovenness that we see as a potential future. In the past, the Brooklyn Bridge actually moved 400,000 people across the bridge. Today, it is a little over 100,000, because people are kind of in their cars and the cars take up a certain amount of space. By actually prioritizing people, bicycles, and autonomous vehicles, we could reach back to the 300,000 to 400,000 of people that move across that bridge every single day. And we are currently doing a downtown Brooklyn public realm project that is looking to expand the sidewalks. I'm sure you've noticed in the past 10 years, the more people have moved to downtown, more people are working in Brooklyn downtown, but the sidewalks are what they are. We haven't really given the same thought to the public realm. So we've actually created a guideline of how to expand, both with urban furniture and with sort of graphics, to again prioritize people over vehicles. And we've proven that this is possible in a place like Superkilen in Copenhagen. So that is just a preamble to the talk, but I wanted to show you how just here locally, we could take this moment that we have and really think about what is the future that we would like to live in. So the talk is entitled Formgiving, which is the Danish word for design, giving form to that which is not yet there. And I'm sure all of you, when you're confronted with a blank sheet of paper, are probably seeing the daunting task there is to create something that does not yet exist. And we all probably remember when we first started to sort of play with Legos. Legos were an excellent way of actually starting to use building blocks and arrange them and build with them to create actually the realities or the dreams and the visions that we had. We have been really fortunate to have about 34 of our projects actually built in Legos by Lego enthusiasts, kids and adults. And then they take pictures of these projects and send them to us. And so we actually celebrated all of this Lego work and held an exhibition last year at the Danish Architecture Center that collected all of those projects in Lego. And it also presented 70 of our other projects as we have designed them. So over 100 projects were shown in this exhibition and showed the actual process of how we design, and also the technical sort of capacity and knowledge that needs to exist in order for you to also then realize those designs. So that is called Formgiving. It's sort of the third installment of from Yes is More, Hot to Cold, to Formgiving, and is now also a catalog. And as you flip open the catalog, you'll be confronted by a quote by William Gibson, the author of Neuromancer. And he said that the future is already here, all around us. It's just not very evenly distributed. And what he means by that is that in different fields and different professions, there are sort of advancements, technological advancements, or sort of realizations. And our job really is to start to collect all of these different advancements and sort of visions of the future and combine them into a greater leap into that future. And so, you know, we have one world and one set of resources. So how do we actually start to understand this world's resources? How do we start to balance the ecological demands and the sort of challenge of development to actually create one that can be in harmony with each other, as well as to sort of adopt and to adapt those new technologies? So I'm going to go through a series of projects from the smallest to the largest to show you how we, through our work, actually speak to this future in different places. This is a cabin. It is a mere 170 square feet. It sits basically on 4 footings and can be built by 2 people in sort of a month. It's all palletized and it's, you know, an A-frame. So it's nothing revolutionary, but it is actually thinking about how do we create something that is on a budget, that can be offline and could sort of take advantage of the solar heat gain, and to sort of create a home away from home that allows people to, on very minimal means, not have such an impact on their surroundings. And so you can see that as you rotate around the building, it takes a lot of different shapes. There's also two sleeping areas, the one that Martin is sitting on right there, and then you go up the ladder to another sleeping nook above. There's a wood burning stove for heat. There's a little kitchenette with an electric stove that you can warm up your meals. And it even has outfitted with a bathroom and a shower. So we are looking for ways, you know, with one glazed surface to bring in the daylight. And again, to allow you to be connected and to be sort of close to nature without having the impact that you often do when you're building an entire house. At 7,000 square feet, this is Bjarke meeting Kim Lautrup, who said, he came into our office and he said, I have a brief for you, which is get my son out of my house. He had a son who's 22 years old. There's very little or few options for students to live in dormitories because the country has not been building them. The universities have not been keeping up with the pace. And so many students of your age at NYIT, they still live home with their parents, or they surf sofas at their friends. And so his brief and what he came to us with was, how can we build affordably so that students can actually afford to live in a place like Copenhagen? So again, we came up with an idea to upcycle containers. And this is nothing new. Low Tech here locally has been upcycling containers for a long, long time. But one thing that we wanted to look at specifically was the social dimension, because many of those projects that had kind of upcycled containers, maybe everyone mute their microphone. I think there's a little bit of background noise. Many of those upcycled containers actually did not really consider the spaces that those containers made. So by looking at actually how you could arrange the containers, we came up with the sort of bottom right concept. It has a solar array for heat and electricity. It can be connected to a wind farm. It takes the passive cooling that you can get from the seawater. And so, you know, with 9 upcycled containers, you can create 12 units of housing. And for actually half the cost of a typical dorm room, new construction, and built in 1/3 of the time. So these are the reason that this is suddenly an option for kids. And here you have the containers. This was done in Poland in a ship wharf. They were refurbished. They were tugged across the North Sea to Copenhagen. We're now also looking for local shipyards that could do this. It was tugged, and within just a few weeks, all 12 apartments were filled. This bed right here with the most amazing view is about $600 a month in the center of the city. I want to stress that enough. So you are literally a bicycle ride away from your classes, and you are enjoying that life. So we, let me see if this, if I can, maybe this is working. This is the quality of life here on the water. So the city of Copenhagen actually really thought it was a great concept. They ordered 5 more, and now 72 students are living in the waterfront in Copenhagen. And the best thing, and other cities have actually started asking about having these also in their waterfront areas and their canals. So even here in New York, you could actually in a place like Hoboken or other places that have shielded harbors, you could also have these floating there. And the best thing is that his son moved into one of those, so you have a happy client at the end of it. We're up to 12,000 square feet. This is a restaurant called Noma. It is in Copenhagen, and it is known for really amazing food that is within the season. So you can only get certain foods when they are available. And it is reusing an old artillery warehouse that you can see. The long building, the concrete one, is the old artillery, about 200 years old. And then you have the smaller buildings, which we added to it. It's really in the center of Copenhagen. So you walk out and into the front door. That's actually a closet where you can sort of hang up your jackets. And the feeling that we wanted you to have as you entered into the restaurant was that you were entering into someone's home. So it's very domesticated. It has a fireplace. The bricks really give it sort of a domestic feel. You can sit in a sort of living room area to wait for your table to be prepared. And all of the chefs are not hidden away. They're right in the heart of the restaurant preparing the food. And you have 1 or 2 servings in the dining room. So this is an amazing place to experience. And you can also go into a sort of larger group. We really looked at the materiality and wanting each of those buildings, there's 11 of them, to have a different character, a different feeling. So you have the barbecue pit is out of Corten steel, and the smell just sort of goes throughout. You have the glass houses that are growing the herbs and all of the things that they need for the garnishes. And it's really that sort of homey, cozy feeling that you have going there. 14,000 square feet, just sort of inching up. This is an old textile mill, and they wanted to have a gallery, an art gallery that was built adjacent to it. And so the competition was to basically just build an addition to this old brick building. And then they have beautiful sculptures all around the riverbeds. They have 2 sides of the rivers. We felt that by building an addition to the old building, you were losing an opportunity to actually deal with the 2 sides of the site. And as opposed to having people take a loop on one side of the site, walk across to the other and do another loop, why not actually position the bridge so that it closes the loop of the sculptures, and that the building itself is a bridge. It is a sculpture, and of course, it is an art gallery as well. So that challenge of how to build a space that can sort of accommodate different types of art, sculptures, paintings, and installations. And then here you have the sort of connection back to the textile mill. And this is the vision that we had for it when we entered the competition, and then what was built out. And so maybe also to sort of note that it's only made up of straight pieces. So the curve that you see there, the twist, is really because we have made all of the sort of metal extrusions a straight extrusion that sort of simply moves in a curve the width of the material. And so using the width of the material to our advantage, we could get that sort of very shapy curve. And you know, these things are also engineering marvels. So we worked with AKT engineers to create this bridge structure, which is really a sort of enlarged truss that allows you to sort of span that river. And then here you have the sort of final experience. 70,000 square feet. This is an area in Copenhagen that really is a nondescript neighborhood. It's also a site where two grids are coming together, so there's a bit of a clash, and the site itself is sort of pie-shaped because it was kind of a leftover space between these two city grids. And many people find that very hard to develop or very hard to deal with architecturally. And this site was chosen to have a affordable housing project on it. And we wanted to find a way that it didn't go down the same route of many affordable projects, which was on the left, where you kind of just stack units one on top of the other, and they typically are just sort of rectilinear or square. And there's very little architecture sort of investment, typically just the choice of facade material that separates them. We wanted to find a way that you could use pre-manufacturing, modular construction, and to kind of pull those bricks apart to create different types of spaces inside. And so the project had to meet very strict codes and regulations and price points, which we were able to maintain because every unit is the same. But then when we brought those units, we could sort of arrange them in an organic way, so it isn't just another rectilinear kind of house. We looked at the site, which was pie-shaped, and we wanted to kind of give it that curve so we could create different types of outdoor space on either side of it. And then the sort of concrete prefab is then clad in wood, which is a kind of ipe wood that silvers over time. We pulled back the storefront so that you also have generous terraces in each of the units. And if you look at, this is what the dining room and kitchen looks like. So it's about almost 12 feet clear from floor to ceiling. And we get that because of the way that we have stacked the different prefab boxes. So you step up into your bedrooms that are more intimate, and then you step down into your kitchen and living room. And then again, the storefront is pulled back to give you that outdoor room. So there's a sort of generosity of both space and light. These are through units. So we're also not, we're very cognizant of not creating sort of north-facing only units, but really thinking about how we can get daylight from different sides and different qualities. These units were very, very sought after. So they had a waiting list of about 10,000 folks that wanted to move in here. And I think that's something that is really in Denmark is really, I think, great, is that there is such a commitment to creating all types of housing. And that's really how we got our start as architects. We started building really, really affordable residences, such as the VM houses, the mountain houses, the Bedre Billige Boliger, and the Clovermarken residences. All those concepts and visions were also about how to build homes for all. We're up to 330,000 square feet, and tensions and misunderstandings and also conflicts also arise everywhere. This is a moment when I moved to Denmark, and there was a big sort of misunderstanding and also a kind of disrespect shown to the new immigrants to Denmark, where Mohammed was actually shown in sort of a caricature that really enraged and angered many Muslims around the world. This caused a great sort of reflection within Danish society of, how can we actually build more and better bridges between all of us? So these were demonstrations that did not only occur in the Middle East. This is a demonstration on the street that our office was actually on in this part of Copenhagen. And there were major demonstrations similar to the ones that we saw also across New York and across the United States at the time. We wanted to do something about that. And so in that neighborhood where this was all happening, there are over 60 different nationalities represented. And so it's really the most diverse part of Denmark. And you can see it just by walking out on the street, how diverse it is. And so rather than the city held a competition to create a park for 1 kilometer long that would celebrate and try to bridge those differences. So rather than sort of choosing a lot of different benches and street lights and different sort of urban furniture, we actually crowdsourced. And so we asked, we held about 100 meetings. We had radio announcements that were asking people to come up with ideas. And we received over 1,000 objects and considerations of places that people had been or come from then we, as we're not architects, we became curators of that 1 kilometer space. And we brought all of those elements from their home country to Denmark. So as you're then riding your bike through the Superkilen space, you would be then starting to be confronted with messages and with artwork and with real sort of demonstrations as well that were about the very sort of concepts of how to live together. We have a red sign from the Red Square sign from Moscow that's just sitting on a shawarma stand. We have a Thai boxing rink that is there that basically anyone can just bring their gloves and start a match. The bus stop is from Amman, Jordan. The fountain from Morocco, and now sits there in Denmark. This is from Japan, and we brought the Japanese contractors who build these all over Japan to build it in Copenhagen. Even the landscaping, this is a palm tree that grows in a similar climate to Copenhagen, but in China. And all of the landscaping in the 1 kilometer is also from crowdsourced and brought in from different places. The dentist sign that you see right there is a real dentist sign from Jordan. And so it's a place of gathering. There are benches, there are board games, and people really have changed this neighborhood through a project like this. And this was then also commemorated during the Aga Khan Awards as one of those projects that sort of really epitomizes how through built space you can build respectful sort of contemporary architecture and landscape architecture for the world. And we're up to 770,000 square feet. So this is right here in New York on the Hudson River. This is the project that really brought us to New York about 10 years ago, called the FAIA project. It's on West 57th. It's a rental property, and it takes up an entire city block. New York is, of course, made up of the typology of skyscrapers built on podiums. In Europe, Copenhagen, where we come from, it is courtyards. 90% of the city are these courtyards, low-lying buildings. So when you combine the sort of Copenhagen typology with a New York one, we created a hybrid, which we called a court scraper, a courtyard building that takes the height of a high-rise, 44 stories tall. And this was completed about 4 years ago, is looking at what Central Park is at the urban scale for New York. We wanted to bring that courtyard to the building scale. So it's actually the same proportions of Central Park, but just 13,000 times smaller. And we also wanted to program it and activate it. So there's a meadow, there are water features, there's sort of granite steps and a wavy brick path. So, you can be living in the center of New York and seriously hear birds chirping outside of your window as you wake up on the weekend mornings. And really proud to say that also 20% of this building are affordable units. So at the time that it was completed, a studio apartment in this building was about $560 a month. And when you compare that to other possibilities, again, you have to really think about building for all and not for a select few. We're up to 4.1 million square feet. This is in Copenhagen, a project we just recently completed called Copenhagen. And this is, a power plant. And maybe some of you would ask, why would an architect be interested in designing a power plant? And, we turn that around and say, why not? And you really have to have a great client that also wants and cares about architecture to actually understand what an architect could bring to this, what is typically an engineering kind of program. And what we felt was, most areas of energy production are huge concrete wastelands in cities. They can be in city centers, they can be on the periphery of cities, but it's very rare that you would, have trees and grass and sort of recreation around power plants. Most people are NIMBYs, and they would say, not in my backyard. So we wanted to create kind of the world's first power plant that was a YIMBY power plant. Yes, I want that in my backyard because I can actually send my kids there to play all day and recreate. I could, jog up the footpath every weekend morning. And then all of the programs, there are bars and restaurants and really amazing types of programs that you can actually experience when you're out there, and the sort of biodiversity that it also brings to, that is a typical power plant that you're looking at, and this is the new one. So this one is replacing all of that you see. That will be torn down over time, is remarkable. And then you can also, in the flattest country of Europe, you can start to prepare for your downhill career. And it still functions as a power plant. That's the number one thing. And here's a few shots of just what it's like to ski down. So, how can a power plant suddenly become kind of a trademark for a city to the same value that the Little Mermaid has? And it's remarkable to see like the types of people that have been coming. Greta Thunberg, Mayor Bloomberg have all made sort of side trips to Copenhagen to go and see the plant and to learn what it's doing. We're up to 10 million square feet. So back here again in New York, this is what New York looked like in the 1930s, a very active waterfront. I don't think many people considered living on that active waterfront back in the 1930s. And maybe one of the biggest sort of changes that have occurred in this city is how those areas of waterfront that were once commercial have all turned into green parks, recreational areas, and sort of spaces for people to flow into. And then, of course, 8 years ago, Superstorm Sandy knocked out the power and the livelihood and made a lot of people homeless, some for weeks and months. So, we were tasked with looking at how to look at the entire sort of coastline, 10 miles of which were flooded, and to come up with a flood prevention or flood management system. And we came up with what we call the Big U, sort of a coastal protection that you can see here. But instead of just having engineers engineering it, we wanted to sort of see how can we bring humans and human activities into this infrastructure. So we call this social infrastructure. And that was the vision that we came up with 7 years ago. And what has then led to actually a series of projects, the first of which we're working on now, which is going to raise the parkland and create new sort of bike paths and also play areas, recreational areas. Imagine in our lifetime being able to bike 10 miles along the waterfront of Manhattan without ever crossing a single street. Then on the east side, it's a little tighter, so you have to do the flood prevention in a sort of tighter space. But also that we looked at and we provided some visions for it. So the first 2.5 miles, 1/4 of the Big U, we've been working on for the last 6 years, and we'll start construction in a few months, and we'll be ready by 2026. So, you know, these things, they take a lot of time. They also go across administrations. So when you're thinking on this scale or level, you really have to put a lot of yourself into it and make things that are also appealing to not only one political agenda, but to multiple agendas, multiple people, so that you can actually get these things also implemented. 100 million square feet. You know, by 2050, 90% of the world's largest cities will be exposed to rising seas. So not only New York, this is really affecting all cities. And I would say that you, as an architect that's graduating now, one of the areas that you will probably be working on as you enter into the profession are these resiliency issues around the world. We have, of course, Miami, and even these incredible historical monuments like Venice that are slowly flooding more and more. So being inspired by the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN and working together with the UN Habitat, we looked at climate refugees. These are people that are displaced or homeless because of rising seas. This can be in cities, but it could also be entire islands in the South Pacific. So there is estimates of several hundreds of thousands of people that will become climate refugees as the sea levels rise. And there are sort of, the UN is starting to think about how to address these issues. So if you remember, we were already interested in amphibious architecture. So this took it to sort of a new level. We looked at what would the sort of people or family unit be, and what are their needs in order to create a pure circular system that deals with energy production, waste removal, food production, and of course, work and sustainable sort of ecosystems. So we looked at all of the different sort of technical requirements, looked at all of the sort of agricultural requirements and seafood farming. And then we started to look at what scale or size of pontoon that stabilizes that type of development. And then what are the needs of actions? What is the right scale of the buildings? How can those buildings then be programmed? And then how can we create an energy production on the roof so the roofs become larger and also provide a solar shading for the rest of the space. So this turned into sort of looking at different typologies, then looking at what are the sort of technical needs and guts of the pontoon, and working with a lot of specialists in those areas. So here's a cross section of what sort of a floating city could look like, and then you would have sort of vertical farming, ocean farming that would also be underwater as well as above water. These could then grow from islands into clusters, into archipelagos, and these would all be within a short distance to a mainland and be protected, of course, by harbors. This is not something that you would build out in the open sea. So just showing you some of the images that we've produced. We presented this last summer at the UN. Now we're in discussions. It was presented again at the World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi back in November of last year. And we are soon signing a sort of agreement, a memorandum of agreement with Abu Dhabi to build the first prototype of one of these for several hundred people to be floating in the bay there. And then you could also start to see how these could be sort of then of course tailored to the different regions that they would be built in. And finding the right bays or protective areas is the next thing. So we, I hopefully have taken you for a tour, shown you from the smallest projects to the biggest sort of visionary thinking, how the future is happening all around us, and that we could sort of think about that. But do realize that currently you and I and many of us are actually using two worlds of resources within our life kind of quality of life and our life choices. So we really have to start thinking, how do we both reduce and use those resources more intelligently? So we also have a project that is looking at providing habitation on the moon and also on Mars. And this is actually closer than many of you might think. This is done by NASA and is a project that we're doing together with ICON. ICON is America's first 3D printer that has produced and printed a home in Austin, Texas. So we are working with this 3D printing company to basically use the lunar regolith, which is the dust that you have there, and using that as a building material to shield from radiation and to create a pressurized environment. So you can see the printer is printing one of those circles right there. It creates a structure. The structure has a lot of cavities that you fill with more of the regolith, so it's weighted down. But there's very few sort of windstorms, or of course, also very little gravity that you deal with out on the moon. So there are things that also allow you to actually build this. And we're looking at developing this now into the next phase of creating a really 3D printed version of this here on this planet. And then thinking about how we take the next steps to do so on the moon. This is sort of peeling apart the different pieces to show you the different sort of layers, protective layers, as well as then the habitable layers. So that's it in a nutshell, and I look forward to the discussion that will follow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kai-Uwe, for the fascinating, inspiring, really, really amazing presentation with such an incredible range of projects at different scales with different forms of thinking embedded into processes and actually outcomes, because we saw real solutions and real buildings or open spaces or community engagement at different scales, really, really part of a site, a community, a city. So I'm really impressed by the variety of thinking that you presented. And I would like maybe expand the conversation on the relationship between your work that you just presented and you're dealing with constraints, with constraint as opportunities for being creative, for being innovative, for thinking about solutions that maybe are not the usual solutions. Maybe you need to go a little bit further in your with your mindset, and particularly about the pre-existing conditions. How are they informing? How is history, before we go into how is history informing and pre-existing condition and the past of what is already there informing actually your process of design? Is that part of your inspirations? Are those moments from a variety of references that are informing big resilient architecture and all the forms of designs that we saw?
Yes, so I think I would answer that question by I think that if you look at and read the essays and the writings that Bjarke has written, both in Yes is More and Hot to Cold, and now soon Formgiving, you'll see that the history and the sort of the genius loci of the place is critical to understanding the steps that we take. So Bjarke often refers to this as kind of vernacular 2.0, because oftentimes in the vernacular, there are truths, truths of climate, truths of materials, and truths of systems. And so when you look at something, you know, like the moon habitat, it's really also resembles a lot like an igloo that you would find in the tundras of Greenland or in Alaska. And it's because the shape of an igloo is, of course, shaped to retain and maintain as much heat and insulation as possible. And so you find that just simply being in a similar kind of environment that is incredibly hostile to life, with temperature variances that are, you know, would certainly kill you, how do you start to imagine how to build on the surface of the moon? And so there's a lot of research. There's a lot of looking at, you know, those that have come before. And so even with something that has absolutely little context or no history whatsoever, is built entirely on the history of how humans have survived in hostile and tundra-like experiences. Then you can, you know, of course, transport to a city. And I would say that, you know, our projects are very often very much tied to local building techniques and sort of critical thinking. But we're also at the same time, we're, you know, making questions, or asking ourselves questions, and in that process, we distill a few of those things. So we're also not bounded by traditions. We learn from those traditions, and then we develop kind of our response to them.
Excellent. And continuing on the discourse of the approach to the future that you just show in your last projects, I see that there is this visionary approach to fabrication, to materials, to building logics, in environments that are not actually so familiar yet, or they are more part of our imaginary conceptions. So because we saw actually how you go from a, let's say, very traditional materials to the use of technology in a way that is actually very much into future explorations. And so I'm curious about the relationship of your work with technologies, and particularly the urgency to be engaged with responsible and sustainable practices in support of our built environment that is hopefully, through technology, potentially, if we use it correctly in the right way, we could actually use technology for a more human, healthy, and safe future for us.
Yes, I mean, I'll begin by saying that there are, of course, people who are asking us, why are we looking to habitate the moon when we have so many issues right here on this planet? And that is certainly one way of looking at it. However, our approach to thinking about what you just were asking about, the ecological responsiveness of the designs, you know, by building on the moon or building the floating cities here on, you know, on a large body of water, we have to create a circular system. We have to create food production. We have to deal with waste. We have to find ways of upcycling and recycling everything that is in existence because of the cost of actually bringing things either to the floating city or to the moon. Therefore, by actually kind of solving many of the circular issues in terms of constructing out of the local regolith on the moon, or also finding ways of creating food production that is perhaps pescatarian for the floating city dwellers, we're dealing with the built environment in an incredibly holistic way, because we're looking at not only the materials for the buildings, we're looking at also how do the people that are living there get their foodstuffs and their calories from, and where are they and how are they interacting with the rest of the systems that are required for life. And I think it's a sort of systemic thinking that I think is also really, really necessary if we are to find ways to break this sort of throwaway societies where materials are produced, manufactured, used once, and then discarded. We really have to move into a kind of circular economy where products are able to be recycled and reused. And I think that that is something that we are extremely cognizant of, and also are bringing to our work.
One more observation, and then I'm going to open to the audience. You use the term social infrastructure. I think is crucial to talk about social infrastructures in many ways, especially today at the current time where we are approaching at the same time simultaneously pressing issues that we are facing, not just climate and environmental crisis or global pandemics, but also all this was revealing the social and the racial injustice, the equity and the inclusivity that is in many places still missing. We are still far away from being a fully diverse society. So I wonder if you can give us your thoughts about, as a designer, as an architect, as an urbanist, as a landscape professional, as in multiple forms, somebody thinking about design, how could you enact change towards a social infrastructure that is informing our cities?
Yes, I think the first thing you have to learn is it's not going to be solved by architects alone. So you have to learn to be cross-disciplinary, and becoming friends with traffic engineers, learning to understand what the policy and the sort of the regulations and the zoning kind of histories that are there, and how one can work within those regulations and or offer new ways of finding the sort of ways of combining that holistic approach. So, the reimagining of the Brooklyn Bridge was not us alone, because as architects alone, we would have looked at it as a kind of more of an aesthetic, perhaps sort of solution, one that of course could estimate or guesstimate the impacts on traffic, but we actually brought on traffic engineers, structural engineers, and also policy people that could begin to tell us what is possible and how could one rethink the Brooklyn Bridge into actually a system that would start to rebirth and become much more efficient again in moving people to between the boroughs. So I would say to everyone that that's what's also beautiful about universities, is that you may be in one department, but there are a lot of departments out there, and you have a responsibility to also understand other perspectives and other ways of working. And that, again, as an architect, you have to bring those voices in order to really create substantial and meaningful change.
Thank you so much. If anybody want to wade in, and just feel free to ask questions. I'm opening to the audience. I don't see.
There is one question. Yeah,
There's
two.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Questions.
Oh,
I can just I can just say the question and then I can answer it, if that's fine. So, hi Victoria. So you're using the circular design as prototypes for circular system design. Yes, I think that that when you start thinking about circular design, it could be something that, of course, is about materials and about the reuse of those materials, kind of a cradle-to-cradle concept. But when you start thinking about that, you very quickly start seeing that one decision is actually connected to 10 other decisions. And so it is, and very quickly becomes a systemic kind of issue. And those are also the conversations that you should have very early on with your clients. The siting of a building, many will tell you, is one of the most important decisions you'll ever make, because everything hinges upon where a building is set on a site, and the way that the sun hits it, and the way that the facades sort of play, and then, you know, whether you have cross ventilation or not, like all of those decisions that you make very early on in a scheme have these compounding sort of impacts on a finished design. And that's why it's so important to really think of the whole systems as opposed to just individual objects or materials. Cameron asks, as an architecture student, it is up to us to make all design decisions, program, placement, structure, materials, and this can definitely be overwhelming, at least for me. I am very interested in how large firms like yours work logistically. When faced with large projects, how are the different levels of design broken down, and how are these jobs dispersed throughout? That's a very, very insightful question, because I think the word that you use is scale, right? So, or you didn't use it, but you mean it. When projects increase in scale, they certainly also increase in complexity. And I think that you're very privileged in a school kind of environment where you're able to make a lot of these decisions yourself. And it's really important to learn how to make those decisions and to have meaningful reasons for why your decisions are the way that they are. That's what when you're presenting your work, that's what you're literally doing, is describing why something looks the way it does, or acts or performs the way it does. And we, of course, we have a fairly sizable firm, and we have therefore also many different perspectives. So we have landscape professionals, we have engineering professionals, we have interior people, we have space planning folks, we have product designers. So you could say that we look at our designs from these different perspectives. And that's also what gives them, in many ways, a sort of aha moment, maybe like the court scraper, that the landscape is such an integral part of that residential project, and that many residential projects that are built in the city don't ever have that quality of indoor-outdoor space, or don't care to make that indoor-outdoor space. But that is the very quality that we were trying to bring in to a city like New York. I hope that answers your question. And that, of course, is we break down our very large projects into teams. And of course, they bring their expertise or their perspectives to the table. And we work collectively with everyone from our design assistants all the way to the project leaders and the partners to think through our concepts. Jay asks, the project in Denmark, which got the Aga Khan Award, as you mentioned, it was done with the help of local people's perception. My question is, how did you identify, derive a program out of people's thousands needs, wants, and suggestions? How did you manage to deal with the people's perception and architect's perspective at the same time? So our ordering principle for the 1,000 requests or suggestions was that we had a red square. We broke the 1 kilometer into 3 sections, a red square, a black market, and a green park. And we really wanted the park to be basically made by the people, for the people, and that we as architects kind of disappeared. And we also felt that it was as much a landscape project and as much a kind of cultural curation project. So we partnered with landscape architects out of Berlin called Topotech, and a artist collective called Superflex. And so we each had a fair share or a voice, so that we collectively decided how to deal with people's suggestions. Some of the suggestions that came in were very personal and were very intense. There was the desire to, go to Palestine and to bring soil or earth from Palestine and place it into the park. And so the artist collective actually traveled to Palestine with the 2 sisters that were suggesting this. And then they found a contractor to basically transport some dirt in containers back to Denmark. And then it was in a ceremony spread on the ground there. And, that meant a lot to the 2 sisters, but then also to the community at large. And I think that, that was the kind of, that was as far as we would also go to make sure that people were heard and that those projects and things could be implemented. That was all the questions. Oh, there's Eddie. What are the energy considerations taken when working with complex geometries, such as the many of the projects you presented, in particular your hybrid building? Energy considerations. So, what's really odd, Eddie, is that everyone seems to think that building a tall glass flat building is somehow better energy considered than a pyramid structure. I ask you a simple question. What is the most stable structure on this planet? And it is a mountain. It's very hard to move mountains. So when you have a very wide base at the base of the building and a small tip, you actually don't have the same wind forces that you do when you build a tall glass skyscraper that you find typically in most major cities like New York. So the glass skyscrapers actually use a lot more energy to keep themselves standing up than our building. It's just that for whatever reason, people tend to think that because there's a lot more tall buildings, that somehow is smarter than building like a mountain-shaped building. So I kind of ask you, please always ask this question of any building that you see, because once you basically understand the energy considerations of one type or shape of a building versus another, you can then make those decisions for yourself. And something that also engineers didn't quite understand was that as you move up the building in the via, you actually need less and less rebar in the concrete, because all the rebar that you need in the tall skyscrapers is against the wind force. When the wind force is taken away, you can therefore use a lot less material and save both money and energy. So the embedded energy is less in that shape of a building. And of course, we're not using much glass. The majority of that shape is stainless steel with cutouts for the balconies, and those are recessed. So there's also shading that's offered through the shape. So believe it or not, the VIA building is actually a very energy efficient building, and the Durst organization that built it is actually known in the city as one of the most energy efficient clients in the city as well. Vaibhav asks, your firm's work will undoubtedly provide inspiration for future generations of designers, architects, and thinkers. What are some of the earliest instances in which you found yourself captivated by great design? Well, I would say as a child, growing up and touring the old cathedrals in Europe certainly were moments of awe-inspiring kind of spaces. My family did a lot of traveling across Europe and also in the United States. But, you know, I would say I had the same experience here in the US when I was out west in a place like Mersa Verde, which is just, you know, some rock spaces within a cliff that, you know, some Anasazi Native Americans were living in and were, you know, 400 years ago were living there. Some of the oldest structures in the United States. They offered me the same incredible sort of concept. And you know, one is vernacular and the other is sort of architecture, but both were very, very inspiring to me as I became an architect. And I would say to that the best thing you can do after you finish your studies at NYIT is to travel and to get out of the dark sort of rooms with history slides and all of that. Go see these things yourself. Go and experience things as opposed to just reading about them in a book or seeing them on a slide. As far as Big's approach to housing, clearly it is changing. So my question is, how do I plan or propose a housing idea that seems to be based on an infrastructure that is supposed to change so often? I don't know if I agree that housing has changed much. I do believe that there are changes. Something as simple as a kitchen is closed so that all the smells stay in the kitchen to an open kitchen that is, of course, the center of your living room and your dining room. That is a big change in a residential project. But I think, you know, everyone loves daylight. Everyone loves an outdoor space. Everyone loves materials that last. So I think and I hope this to be true, is that, you know, residential architecture and housing, there are great housing projects throughout history. And, you know, studying the courtyard houses of the 1950s Los Angeles is just as valid today and could just create the same quality of residential experience as 70 years ago. So the changes that you might have seen could be just in, you know, a pyramid is going to look different than a glass skyscraper. But when you experience it, and I would ask you to go experience the VIA project, you're going to see that many of the experiences are exactly the same as the glass skyscraper. It's just formed differently. And so when you create a new form, you really have to think it through. You have to figure out all the challenges, and then you have to convince the client that you know how to build it. Two more questions, and then I'll give it back to you, Maria. What was the level of involvement the firm had with the Pegasus project? Such a design of modules or path connections and nodes for the Hyperloop. we've been active with the Hyperloop project. You can go back and see, we've been active with it now 3.5 to 4 years. We were there with the founders. We started developing the concept for stations and the tube. I think even the first animation of Hyperloop 1 was by us. And so we've been working with them on a variety of projects now, both feasibility studies, one in Pune, connecting Mumbai with Pune in India, as well as the Pegasus project, which is developing the first test pod that just sent 2 humans through the tube at a little over 100 miles an hour. We were the designers. We are product designers. So we have product design in our office. Kilo Design also is a product designer, and we used to be together in a company called Kibisi. So Lars Larsen is in Denmark, and we asked him to work together with us to co-create the Pegasus project. But I do hope that you like the design, and I hope one day you're able to experience the Hyperloop. As buildings become ever more complicated in our denser and denser cities, do you believe it is more important to have great knowledge of art and artistic values of architecture, or has it become more important to graduate with an in-depth knowledge of building science? What an age-old question. You know, there is something called the Beaux-Arts, and that was a school of thinking that sort of was from, say, almost 200 years ago, that created the sort of artistic approach to architectural education. And then there are the sort of more engineering school of thought. And I think NYIT is out of that sort of more science-oriented and sort of engineering-oriented, but you really need both, a little bit of both, sprinkled evenly or sprinkled one a little bit. It's like a masala of spices. There's not one way of doing it. And I think that, you know, that's the beauty of our profession, is that you really never stop learning. So you're in your 20s right now, get ready. You're gonna be learning for the next 50 years on how to do architecture. So get a little bit of Beaux-Arts and get a little bit of NYIT.
Thank you so much, Kai-Uwe. I found this conversation really thoughtful. I hope our students learn from you. You are really, really inspiring. The conversation was amazing. So I really, really want to thank you. And I hope we can find a way to stay connected and eventually revisit some of your concepts and your ideas and your projects a little bit even deeper at the level of one of our studios. We can be creative how we can actually engage with you again. So I would like to thank also the committee, the lecture series committee, my staff, my faculty, and all the students that today were here with us. And thank you, Kai-Uwe, again for your time and for your generosity for sharing your time with us. Thank you, everyone.
It was an absolute pleasure, and definitely I'd love to come by the school when all this is said and done.
Thank you.
See you, Tom, Pablo. Ciao, guys.
Ciao.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great evening, everyone.